Welcome to another episode of the Bark Brigade podcast by Dogazilla Magazine. So I want you to imagine a specialized dive team plunging into the freezing waters of a pitch-black lake.
Oh man, that sounds intense.
It is, and they are completely blind down there. They are searching for critical evidence in a space where, manual sonar has already completely failed.
Right, the technology just can't see anything.
Exactly. But above them, sitting incredibly still on the bow of a search boat, is a Labrador retriever. The human instruments couldn't find a thing, but the dog has already pinpointed the exact location just by sniffing the air hovering above the water.
It genuinely sounds like a scene from a science fiction film. Or, at least a highly dramatized mystery novel,
It really does.
But this is the daily reality of human remains detection dogs, which are commonly referred to as HRD dogs. We are looking at a discipline that feels supernatural, but is actually anchored in rigorous analytical chemistry and complex biology.
Absolutely. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the 5 shocking sense secrets that make these incredible feats possible.
Yeah, we really need to break down the hard science here.
Right, like how a dog can smell a 3,000-year-old bone or trace a microscopic chemical plume through 15 feet of solid earth. We will explore the specific decay profile they track, how their anatomical superpowers allow them to succeed where human technology fails, and how extreme environments impact their work.
From deep water to ancient dirt, yeah.
Exactly. We are also going to look at the handler's perspective. How they interpret the dog's subtle signals, the heavy gear required for field searches, and why this biological power always has to be tethered to modern forensic technology. Okay, let's unpack this.
Where should we start?
By looking back at the sheer lore and history that kicked off this whole field, long before ground-penetrating radar was a standard tool.
That's a great place to start. The formalization of canine forensic programs really started to take shape in the 1970s. Prior to that, law enforcement obviously knew dogs had great noses, but the structured application of using them to locate human remains was in its infancy.
It was mostly just folklore, right?
Exactly. But over the subsequent decades, an astonishing volume of anecdotal evidence began to pour in from handlers.
Yeah.
You had these professionals sharing stories of dogs locking on to sites that looked completely devoid of evidence to the naked human eye. Freshly poured concrete floors, dense woodlands, or chaotic urban disaster zones.
Yeah, I was reading one of the official reports detailed in our sources, and it highlights exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, the riverbank one.
Yes. There was a specific case involving a Labrador that was working a completely overgrown, chaotic riverbank. And the dog flat out refused to leave a very specific, unremarkable patch of dirt near the water's edge.
Right. And because of that, Labrador's absolute stubborn refusal to move, the whole investigation shifted.
Yeah, a specialized dive team was called into the water right at that bank.
And they ended up locating submerged evidence that had been entirely missed by the manual sonar equipment scanning the area earlier.
It's wild. The machine missed the target completely, but the biological sensor caught the invisible chemical trail rising to the surface.
The dog just knew.
And this behavior isn't just limited to modern crime scenes, which is where my mind goes first.
Oh, not at all.
The folklore has always suggested that animals have an eerie ability to sense ancient burial grounds. But now we have documented archaeological reality backing that up.
Right, like the studies in Croatia.
Exactly. Our sources detail controlled studies conducted in Croatia where specialized detection dogs were brought in to survey historical sites. They successfully identified ancient buried remains dating back centuries.
It's incredible.
It shatters this assumption we have that a skeleton just turns to dust and vanishes from the chemical record.
It really does. But, we have to look at this scientifically.
Right, and hold on, I have to play the skeptic for a second here, because we are talking about centuries-old bones. How do we know this isn't just a massive case of confirmation bias?
What do you mean?
Well, you have handlers who want their dogs to succeed, bragging about these miraculous wins. But maybe they're quietly ignoring the 50 times the dog just smelled a buried squirrel or a discarded sandwich.
It's a very fair point.
Are we sure these aren't just random environmental reactions that hopeful humans are misinterpreting as genius?
That level of skepticism is exactly what the scientific community brought to the table, and it is a fundamental requirement for justice.
Right, because the stakes are so high.
Exactly. You cannot put a handler on a witness stand and say, well, my dog has a really good feeling about this spot.
Yeah, no judges can accept that.
Right. So to separate a mere coincidence or a handler subconsciously cueing the dog, From genuine molecular scent identification, researchers realized they needed rigorous, double-blind scientific studies.
Meaning the handler doesn't know where the target is either.
Precisely. They had to transition from anecdotal handler stories to having analytical chemists map out the exact invisible chemical plumes these dogs are reacting to.
So how do you even begin to map an invisible scent? Like, what does the research actually tell us about the human decomposition odor profile?
It starts with gas chromatography and mass spectrometry.
Okay, those are big words.
Basically, scientists capture the air surrounding decaying organic matter and run it through incredibly sensitive machines that separate all the molecules by their weight and structure.
Oh, wow, so they are pulling the air apart.
Yes, and through this process, analytical chemists have identified over 400 specific volatile organic compounds, or VOCs.
VOCs, right.
Yeah, these VOCs emanate from human remains as they progress through various stages of decay. So it is not just one smell, it is a massive shifting chemical cocktail.
What's fascinating here is how researchers managed to take that overwhelming cloud of 400 different volatile organic compounds and filter out the noise.
Yeah, that was a huge breakthrough.
There was a groundbreaking research project in Belgium detailed in the sources that tackled this exact problem. They didn't just map the 400 VOCs.
Right.
They went to the painstaking process of isolating a specific, precise mixture of just 5 key VOCs.
Only 5 out of 400.
Exactly. Out of all that chemical chaos, those 5 specific compounds form the essential blueprint that human remains detection dogs are actually keying into.
And isolating that specific 5-compound signature is nothing short of revolutionary for the forensic community.
Why is it such a game changer?
Because before this, training a dog required access to actual human remains, which presents enormous logistical, legal, and biohazard challenges, as you can imagine.
Oh, of course. You can't just carry that around easily.
Right. But because researchers isolated those exact 5 VOCs, highly specialized laboratories can now synthesize that specific chemical signature safely.
Wow.
Yeah, they can create standardized, sterile training aids.
So a handler can train their dog on the exact molecular blueprint of a 400-year-old crime scene using a safe synthetic liquid in a controlled environment.
Precisely. And this scientific validation is what paved the way for those archaeological scent projects you mentioned earlier.
The ones in Croatia.
Yeah. When researchers took highly trained German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois and ran them through double-blind field trials in those ancient sites, the dogs were accurately locating skeletal remains that were 3,000 years old.
3,000 years. I can't wrap my head around that. How is there even a scent left?
Well, it's because certain bone minerals degrade at an incredibly slow rate, provided the soil conditions are right, meaning the earth isn't overly acidic or subjected to constant heavy erosion. Those minerals continue to off-gas microscopic amounts of those specific VOCs for millennia.
So the scent is practically breathing out of the earth molecule by molecule.
Exactly. It's just a very slow release.
It is a phenomenal biological capability. But the sources point out that the scientific and legal communities still maintain a stance of cautious optimism.
Yes, they do.
If the dogs are this good, why the hesitation in the courtroom?
Because the justice system requires strict reproducibility, and the real world is incredibly chaotic.
Right, it's not a controlled lab.
Exactly. You can control the temperature and wind in a laboratory setting to prove the dog's capability. But out in a dense forest or a rocky ravine, extreme ambient heat or shifting wind velocities drastically alter how a scent behaves.
So the environment messes with the chemistry.
Yeah. A dog might struggle one afternoon purely because a high-pressure weather system rolled in. Therefore, in a court of law, a canine alert is considered corroborative evidence.
Meaning it supports other evidence but isn't enough on its own.
Right. It is a powerful arrow pointing toward the truth, but it cannot stand alone. It must always be validated by independent forensic excavation or physical recovery.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. We know they are looking for these 5 specific VOCs, but how exactly do they physically capture them?
The anatomy is amazing.
Yeah, what is the hardware under the hood that gives a cadaver dog this biological superpower?
Well, to understand the biological machinery, we first have to understand the sheer potency of the compounds they are hunting.
Okay.
During decomposition, human organic matter breaks down into very specific chemical byproducts. Among these are fatty acids and highly distinct compounds known as putrescine and cadaverine.
Putrescine and cadaverine. Even the names sound intense. What exactly are those?
They are toxic compounds produced by the breakdown of amino acids in decaying tissue.
Gross.
Yeah. To a human, they are responsible for that uniquely repulsive, foul odor of rot.
Oh, that smell you can never forget.
Exactly. In a laboratory setting, even synthetic, highly diluted drops of putrescine and cadaverine require strict handling protocols because the smell is so deeply offensive to our biology.
We're basically programmed to hate it.
Right, we are hardwired to be repelled by it, but to a detection dog, those compounds are a brilliant, flashing neon sign.
And their equipment to read that sign is staggering. Let's look at the numbers.
Let's hear them.
A human nose has roughly 6 million olfactory receptors. We think we have a decent sense of smell when we walk into a bakery, right?
Right.
But a dog's nose contains up to 300 million olfactory receptors.
It's a massive difference.
Because of that incredibly dense network, they can detect these specific decay compounds in concentrations as low as parts per trillion.
Parts per trillion is one of those concepts that the human brain really struggles to visualize.
It really is.
It sounds small, but the mathematical reality of it is almost incomprehensible.
Yeah, the best analogy I found to visualize 1 part per trillion is to picture an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Okay.
Detecting 1 part per trillion is the equivalent of finding one single specific drop of water diluted into that entire massive pool.
Wow.
It is an extraordinary level of sensitivity.
It is. But the sheer volume of receptors is only half the story.
Really?
Yeah, the real magic happens in the physical airflow mechanics of the dog's nose. When you or I take a breath, the air goes in, we process a smell, and then we exhale, pushing all that air back out.
Right, and we lose the scent.
Exactly, we lose it. A dog's anatomy doesn't work that way.
Wait, so they aren't just breathing in and out. How do they not exhale the scent right back into the environment?
They have a highly specialized fold of tissue inside their nasal cavity.
Okay.
When a dog inhales, that physical bony structure acts like a traffic cop. It separates the incoming air into 2 distinct paths.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, about 88% of the air goes down the normal respiratory path to their lungs to keep them oxygenated, but the remaining 12% is diverted into a dedicated olfactory path in the back of the snout.
So it's basically a secret, dedicated chamber just for analyzing smells, completely separated from the air they need to survive.
Exactly. That chamber allows the scents to concentrate and accumulate.
That is so cool.
And it gets better. When the dog exhales, the air exits through the slits on the sides of their nose rather than straight out the front.
Oh, I've noticed those slits, but never knew what they were for.
Yeah, this creates a localized aerodynamic swirl that actually kicks up more dust and scent molecules from the ground to be captured in their next sniff.
So they are literally engineering their own microtornadoes to gather more data.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Which explains why certain breeds dominate this specific field. The sources note a massive difference in efficiency based on head shape.
Absolutely.
Long-snouted breeds, the non-brachycephalic ones, like German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, or Labradors, are the gold standard.
Right.
A short-faced breed, like a pug or a French bulldog, simply does not possess the physical real estate in their nasal cavity to facilitate that complex airflow separation.
Yeah. The longer the nasal cavity, the more time and space the air has to be filtered, diverted, and processed by those 300 million receptors.
It is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering.
It really is. And they deploy that specialized hardware to navigate what scientists call vapor diffusion.
Vapor diffusion sounds like a chemistry term, but we are talking about dogs working in the dirt. How does that apply to soil mechanics?
Think of the earth beneath our feet like a massive, dense, multi-layered sponge.
Okay.
When remains are buried, they don't exist in a vacuum. As the biological breakdown occurs, the VOCs turn into a vapor.
Right.
That vapor begins a very slow, complex journey, diffusing upward through the microscopic pockets of air and moisture in the soil.
So the soil is basically breathing these compounds out. And the dogs are tracing those vapors as they seep through incredibly dense layers, navigating roots, rocks, and complex topographies.
Right. And this diffusion is constantly being influenced by external pressures, like atmospheric humidity, ground temperature, and even the type of clay or sand they are buried in.
It sounds incredibly complicated.
It is. The dog is essentially reading a 3-dimensional chemical map that is constantly shifting.
So if a dog's nose is physically designed to pull these specific VOCs out of solid, dry earth, what happens when that target isn't in dirt at all, but trapped at the bottom of a freezing lake?
That's where it gets even more challenging.
Moving into our next section, let's explore how these biological superpowers function when forced into extreme aquatic environments.
Tracking unseen currents in submerged recovery operations is arguably one of the most astonishing demonstrations of canine capability.
It sounds impossible.
When remains are submerged deep underwater, the decomposition process still occurs, albeit differently. As bacteria break down the tissue, they produce decomposition gases.
Okay.
These gases form microscopic bubbles that eventually detach and rise through the water column to the surface.
This brings us back to that wild visual from the introduction. You have a dog standing on the bow of a specialized search boat, leaning out over the water.
Yeah.
They're literally catching the scent of a microscopic gas bubble popping on the surface of a lake.
And because of the wind and the water currents, that bubble might pop on the surface a significant distance away from where the remains are actually resting on the lake bed.
Right, the water moves it.
Exactly. So the dog detects the plume, and the handler works the boat back and forth across the wind, allowing the dog to track that specific scent gradient back to its strongest concentration.
Which is how they pinpoint locations for zero visibility divers.
Mm-hmm.
The human diver might not be able to see their own hand in front of their face in murky water, but the dog on the surface has effectively handed them an exact grid coordinate based entirely on floating gas.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates that a dog isn't just reacting to a general smell, they are dissecting the environment.
Right.
And this analytical ability is just as crucial on land when they are reading ancient soil layers. We discussed them finding 3,000-year-old bones, but the real marvel is their discrimination capability.
Right, because the earth is full of dead things. I mean, forests are essentially giant carpets of decaying plant and animal matter. How do they know the difference?
Even after all the human soft tissue is completely gone and vanished into the dirt, the dog can distinguish the specific chemical signature of human decay from the buried remains of a deer or a raccoon or, standard agricultural runoff.
That's amazing.
They parse out the human bone minerals from a cacophony of background environmental noise.
But no matter how good the dog's nose is, everything we've talked about is completely at the mercy of static weather conditions.
Entirely. Atmospheric limits dictate the success or failure of a search before the dog even steps out of the truck.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Handlers have to constantly analyze microclimates. For example, high humidity is actually quite beneficial. Moisture traps volatile organic compounds closer to the ground, keeping the scent pool highly concentrated and localized.
But flip that around to a day with strong, sustained winds, and the entire game changes. A strong wind can rip those compounds out of the soil and scatter the scent pool miles away from the actual source.
Exactly. The weather fundamentally alters the crime scene grid. Well, the physical location of the evidence might be halfway up a steep hill, but an evening downdraft might push the entire chemical plume down into a ravine a half-mile away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the dog will give a strong, legitimate alert in the ravine because that is where the scent pool gathered. An inexperienced handler might assume the dog is wrong, but a master handler understands how weather moved the target.
Which brings us to the handler's side of the equation, interpreting the sensing signals. What does an alert really mean?
Yeah.
Because a dog turning its head to sniff a bush doesn't automatically trigger a multi-million-dollar forensic excavation.
It absolutely should not. There is a vast difference between canine curiosity and a trained, genuine final response.
Okay.
When an HRD dog enters the outer edge of a scent plume, the change is instantaneous. Handlers are trained to watch for the initial change of behavior stage.
The sources describe this as a sudden, dramatic shift in their physical posture. You will see a sharp change in their head carriage, like they might snap their head around to trace the air current.
Yeah.
Their tail movement becomes rapid and stiff, and you hear that intense rhythmic sniffing as they engage that specialized fold of tissue to pull more molecules into the olfactory chamber.
That change of behavior is the dog's way of saying, I have entered the trail.
But it's not the actual alert yet.
No, it simply means they are working toward the highest concentration of the scent. As they zero in, the handler is waiting for the definitive final response.
And how do we differentiate that from the dog just investigating a fascinating new smell? I mean, a dead badger in the woods is going to get a dog's attention.
Of course. But a genuine alert is a distinct, artificially trained action. The dog is taught to only perform this specific behavior when it has pinpointed the absolute highest concentration of the target VOCs.
Okay.
Depending on the agency's training philosophy, alerts are categorized as either passive or active.
Passive alert dogs will exhibit behaviors like sitting down, lying completely flat, or just freezing in place like a statue, staring directly at the source.
Whereas active alert dogs might bark aggressively or actively scratch at the soil where the scent is strongest.
Right.
The key is that the behavior is distinct, trained, and repeatable. It separates a true target location from a dog that is simply lingering over a distracting wild animal carcass.
But let's be real about the physical toll here. Dogs are living creatures, not machines. They get tired, they get hot, they get thirsty.
Absolutely.
How does a handler know the dog isn't just frustrated and faking an alert? What if the dog has been walking for 4 hours and just wants to sit down, and they happen to sit down in the search grid, inadvertently triggering a passive alert?
That is the nightmare scenario for any forensic team. And it is exactly why handlers spend thousands of hours creating what is known as a baseline.
A baseline.
Yes. Before a canine handler team is ever certified to work a real case, the handler must study their dog under every conceivable stressor in highly controlled training environments.
So they need to know what their dog looks like when it's genuinely working a weak scent versus what it looks like when it's just bored.
Exactly. The handler must memorize the micro-expressions of their dog. They need to know the specific panting rhythm when the dog is overheated.
Right.
They need to recognize the body language of frustration when the scent trail vanishes. If you do not have a rock-solid baseline, you might misinterpret an exhausted dog dropping to the ground for a rest as a passive alert, leading to a disastrously misguided investigation.
Establishing that baseline requires incredibly intense practical steps for professionals working with detection canines. It's not just playing fetch, it's treating the animal's biology as a rigorous scientific instrument.
The training protocols are demanding precisely because the stakes are so high. To ensure absolute legal validity in a courtroom, training must perfectly replicate real-world scenarios.
Right.
We mentioned earlier that they can use synthetic VOCs, but advanced training still heavily relies on real biological training aids.
The sources outline this, and it is intense. We are talking about utilizing actual human blood, fragments of human bone, and real decomposition fluids under strict health and safety protocols.
It sounds incredibly grim to the layperson, but it is a non-negotiable necessity.
Yeah.
A dog trained purely on synthetic drops might become confused by the complex, messy chemical reality of an actual biological site. Exposing them to real human remains and controlled training ensures they won't hesitate or get distracted by standard forest decay during a high-stakes search for a missing person.
And when a certified team finally deploys into the field, they're carrying serious equipment. A handler's deployment kit is designed to provide empirical backup for the courtroom. It's not just a leash and a bag of treats.
No, not at all. The gear they carry is about documenting the environmental reality we discussed earlier. Handlers utilize specialized wind indicators, sometimes as simple as fine powder puffers, to constantly visualize how the microclimate is shifting the air currents second by second.
They also rely heavily on digital technology. They wear GPS mapping devices that track their exact path, overlaying the dog tracks onto a digital map of the search grid.
Yeah, that data is crucial.
They even carry protective, heavy-duty booties to protect the dog's paw pads when working in hazardous environments like glass-strewn disaster zones or extreme heat.
The integration of that GPS tracking is vital for prosecutors. In court, the handler isn't just offering an opinion. They present a digital map, proving the dog systematically bracketed the search area, adjusting to the wind data, and zeroing in on the scent plume.
It translates canine instinct into empirical evidence.
Exactly.
But all the GPS maps and wind powder in the world can't save an investigation if the handler doesn't implicitly trust the dog, while simultaneously protecting the dog from its own drive. They have to recognize the biological limits, specifically olfactory fatigue.
Olfactory fatigue is a physiological wall. Think about walking into a heavily scented candle shop.
Oh yeah, it hits you hard at first.
Right. For the first 60 seconds, the aroma is completely overwhelming. But after 20 minutes, your brain filters it out and you can barely smell the candles at all.
Right, your nose just gets blind to it.
A detection dog's brain goes through a highly accelerated, intense version of this when processing massive amounts of chemical data, especially in adverse conditions.
What happens when they hit that wall?
If a dog is working in 100-degree heat, its primary biological focus shifts to panting to cool its core temperature, which completely disrupts that specialized nasal airflow we talked about. The receptors get overwhelmed, the physical stamina crashes, and the dog begins missing obvious cues.
So the handler has to step in and be the adult in the room. They have to force the dog to rest, hydrate, and clear its nasal passages, even if the dog wants to keep pleasing them.
Knowing when to pull your dog off the grid and force a break is arguably a more vital skill than knowing how to read an alert. which bridges us directly into the ethical considerations of this discipline.
Because placing the entire burden of a criminal investigation or the closure of a grieving family on the shoulders of an animal feels incredibly heavy. Should we rely exclusively on canine recovery?
This raises an important question about the structural safety nets we must build around canine deployment. The dangers of misinterpreting a dog's behavior are catastrophic.
Yeah.
If a handler ego overrides their training and they push a fatigued dog into making a false alert, the legal system might issue a search warrant based on that error.
Which leads to deeply costly, destructive excavations of private property. And even worse, the emotional distress inflicted on families.
It's heartbreaking.
Imagine authorities telling a family that a dog has alerted to the presence of their missing loved one in a specific field. The family prepares themselves for the worst, the excavators tear up the earth, and they find absolutely nothing because the dog was just overheated and frustrated. Juries and the public are highly empathetic to dogs. We inherently want to believe them. That trust demands absolute accuracy.
That ethical imperative is why responsible agencies insist on a philosophy of integration. You never rely on the dog as a solitary magic bullet.
Right.
The biological power of the dog must be integrated with modern technology.
The sources describe it perfectly as a funnel. A single human remains detection dog can sweep hundreds of acres of dense woodland far faster than any human grid search. The dog takes that massive, overwhelming landscape and narrows it down to a specific few square yards.
And once the dog has narrowed the grid, their job is done. That is when the scientists step in, deploying ground-penetrating radar, taking soil chemistry core samples, or flying drone surveillance to confirm the geological disturbance.
So the dog points the finger, the technology proves the case.
Exactly.
And ethically, the core tenet of this field is respecting the dog's role. They are not biological metal detectors that you can throw in a closet until you need them. They are sentient, emotional working partners.
Protecting their welfare is the highest ethical priority. Expecting a dog to perform perfectly in dangerous heat indexes or forcing them to inhale toxic dust and hazardous waste sites without proper decontamination is unacceptable.
Right.
They offer us an incredible service, and in return, handlers must fiercely advocate for their physical and mental safety.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to pull all these threads together by looking at the final verdict and covering a few of the most frequently asked questions that normally cause confusion for people just learning about this field.
Sounds good.
First up, terminology. We've used a few acronyms today. What exactly is a cadaver dog in official terms?
The official professional designation is an HRDD, a human remains detection dog. They are working canines exclusively trained to isolate and trace the specific volatile organic compounds released during human decomposition while actively ignoring all other biological distractions.
And how does an HRD dog differ from the dogs we see on the news searching for lost hikers? What is the difference between an HRDD and a standard SAR dog?
It comes down to the target scent profile. Standard search and rescue, or SAR dogs, are trained to track live human scent. They are looking for the trail of freshly shed skin cells, human sweat, and respiration. An HRD dog is fundamentally different. They are strictly trained to ignore live human scent entirely. A live human walking through the woods is invisible to their objective. They only alert to the chemistry of decay.
We've talked about them sniffing through soil and water, but what are the actual numerical limits here? How far away or how deep can their biological sensors actually reach?
Under optimal weather conditions, meaning favorable humidity and a steady light breeze, an HRD dog can catch the edge of a scent plume from up to a quarter-mile away.
Wow, a quarter-mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And regarding depth, depending on the porosity of the soil and how effectively it allows vapor diffusion, documented cases show these dogs locating remains buried up to 15 feet deep.
15 feet straight down into the earth. That is staggering. And when they do hit that alert, what is their actual success rate?
In controlled, double-blind scientific trials designed to eliminate all handler bias, certified human remains detection dogs consistently demonstrate an accuracy rate of approximately 95%.
So what does this all mean? When we look at the verdict on how these dogs provide justice, the data from decades of field operations, rigorous scientific trials, and astounding historical recoveries is undeniable. These animals operate as incredibly sophisticated biological sensors, achieving results that our most advanced current technology still cannot replicate in the wild.
But the crucial takeaway is that they are not infallible machines. Their 95% accuracy relies entirely on the dedication to rigorous, grueling training, the intelligent management of environmental microclimates, and the handler's educated interpretation of their behavior.
It's all connected.
They are a living, breathing bridge between the mysteries of the past and the justice of the present.
It is a partnership that requires an immense amount of mutual trust.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
As analytical chemists continue to perfectly map those 400 VOCs and engineering advances, imagine a future where we eventually build a digital nose, a piece of technology packed with 300 million electronic receptors that can perfectly mimic a dog's capability. If we eventually replace the biology with purely flawless technology, will we lose something intangible in the process? Because right now, uncovering our darkest mysteries and bringing closure to families relies entirely on a deep, empathetic bond between a human and their best friend.
Thank you for listening, dear Brigadiers. And if you have any questions, visit the source article on Doggozilla magazine at doggozilla.com. That was all for this episode, and until the next time, bye to all listeners of the Bark Brigade podcast.